Today, we come to the end of the first of the 11 sections that make up the book of Genesis. And if you wonder at this point what I'm talking about, perhaps I could suggest that you go back and watch the first video in this series, and then hopefully that will make sense to you. This first section itself falls into three sections. So you have verse 1 of chapter 1, a grand, general, comprehensive statement stating that God created all things. And then the rest of chapter 1 is a detailed account of how God created all things. And then the first three verses of chapter 2 provide a summary of God's all-inclusive creative work. Now, last time we looked at verses 2 to 13 of chapter 1, which cover the first 3 days of creation. So now we come to the record of God's work of creation on days 4 to 6. And on the first 3 days, God creates the three spheres or worlds of life. So on day 1, light, sea and sky on day 2, and on day 3, dry land. Then on the next 3 days, Moses, in his account, revisits each of these spheres and describes how God fills them with living, moving things. So on day 4, sun, moon, stars. On day 5, the fish, the birds that populate the sea and the sky. And on day 6, the land creatures, including, of course, humans, all that populates the dry land. So let's look at day 4, verses 14 to 19 of chapter 1. And God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night. And let them be for signs and for seasons, and for days and years. And let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the fourth day. Now, these newly created heavenly bodies have at least three functions according to Scripture. First of all, they separate the day from the night. Then they are signs, and they are for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. And the signs, I think, possibly refers to their use in aiding navigation. And thirdly, they are to give light upon the earth. Now, everything we know about these created things is truly breathtaking and astonishing. Just think for a moment about the sun. It is 864,300 miles wide. It's over 100 times the diameter of the earth. It has 333,000 times Earth's mass. And if it were hollow, it could hold over 1 million Earths. It burns constantly at 65 million degrees Fahrenheit. It's 93 million miles from Earth. And imagining that we were to drive there, driving non-stop 24/7 at 65 miles an hour, it would take us 163 years to cover the distance. What about the stars? It's estimated that there are at least as many galaxies as there are stars in the Milky Way. In other words, about 100 billion. And Genesis covers the creation of all of these in an almost throwaway phrase, "and the stars." Isaiah in 40:26 tells us that God controls the movements of every star and equally amazingly knows every one of them by name. Then day 5, verses 20 to 23. And God said, "Let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens." So God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the waters in the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth." And there was evening, and there was morning, the fifth day. Somewhat unfortunately, the Authorized Version renders verse 20 as let the waters bring forth abundantly, which suggests somehow that the sea creatures developed out of existing properties within the sea water. But animal life here is created to be self-perpetuating. And the repeated phrase, according to their kinds, rules out any transmutation of the species, a theory much loved by evolutionists. But there's one word we need to note briefly. It's the Hebrew word nephes, which occurs in verses 20 and 21 and is translated as living. Now, actually, this is also the word for soul and is frequently used to refer to both the soul of man and the life of animals. But of course, in a biblical sense, plants do not have real life or soul, consciousness, if you like, but both animals and humans do. Henry Morris makes this important point. He writes, once again, it is obvious that the orthodox evolutionary order is not the same as the order of creation recorded here in Genesis. Evolutionary theory says that marine organisms evolved first, then land plants, later birds. Genesis says that land plants came first, then marine creatures and birds, simultaneously. Furthermore, if anything, the larger sea animals were the first, again, contrary to evolutionary theory. Then we have day 6, verses 24 to 31. And God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things and beasts of the earth according to their kinds. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And God blessed them. And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food, and to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the 6th day. So now earth is populated by livestock and finally by mankind. The livestock would appear to be the final stage in God's preparing the world to be inhabited by humanity, the crown of all of God's creative work. Now, clearly here, we need to consider what we're told about the creation of the first humans, more detail of which will come, of course, in chapter 2. But scripture reads, then God said, let us make man. And many commentators make the point that, as opposed to a simple word of command as used previously, a divine counsel here precedes the creation of men and women. See, previously in Genesis 1, God speaks in the singular form of the verb, but now he speaks in the plural, something that's been termed an executive divine counsel, We see it also in Psalm 2 and 7, 45 and 7, Psalm 110 and 1, Isaiah 48:16. Now, we must be careful not to read too much backwards into this verb form, as if there was a direct reference here to what we understand from the New Testament to be the doctrine of the Trinity. But there is, without doubt, in these earliest of stages of progressive revelation, an indication that the Godhead is, at the very least, a complex being. And then the word translated man is Adam, A-D-H-A-M. And it's related to the word for earth, since his body was made from and contains the basic elements that make up the earth. And the word here, importantly, is generic for humanity. It's not male as opposed to female. So let us make man in our image after our likeness. Up to now, everything is created to reproduce according to their kinds. But man is to be specially created in the image of God and after God's likeness. Most experts agree that image and likeness are parallel rather than distinct realities. And mankind is commanded to populate and to rule over the world, including the naming of the animals, as we'll see in chapter 2. And this is surely an intended expression of his sharing in the very image and likeness of God. Dominion and stewardship of the world involves being given freedom to eat, quote, every plant yielding seed and every tree with seed in its fruit, which is no different than that allotted to the birds and to the animals. And then, of course, it reads this, and behold, it was very good. Now that the work of creation is complete with humanity there, the verdict of good becomes very good, literally exceedingly good. And that statement is crucially important and rules out the possibility that before the creation of man, that there was anything in creation that was not good. So death and all the ills that lead to death, as Romans 5 and 12 so explicitly states, was not present in the world before sin came in through the activity of mankind. But let's just pause for a moment and reflect, wonder at the human body that God created in this way. You know, your body and mine contains 2 million cells, and each one of those 2 million cells has as many working parts as a Boeing 747. The human heart pumps 15 gallons of blood through 100,000 miles of blood vessels every hour. That's the equivalent of 4 swimming pools of blood every year. In an average life of 70 years, your heart and mine will beat nearly 3,000 million times and pump enough blood to fill a string of cars 50 miles long. No wonder one scientist said, "The only evidence I need for the existence of God is my thumb." And yet, despite that, some people say that it is literally incredible, impossible to believe that God created humans. But you know what is unbelievable? Is that these humans simply somehow evolved from some primeval swamp and gradually over millions of years became the uniquely, staggeringly complex beings that we are. Mind you, I've often thought that the theory of evolution does at least prove one sort of scientific fact, namely that there is one born every minute, if you know what I mean. Friends, creation demands a creator, but there's more to it than that. Both science and the Bible agree that when the universe began, it immediately operated according to natural inbuilt laws of physics, such as gravity. And scientists agree with the Bible that these laws were inbuilt and intact and didn't evolve, but they can't explain them. Of course, the Bible does. Creation demands a creator, and laws demand a lawgiver. Then let's look briefly at the first 3 verses of chapter 2, day 7, God's Sabbath rest day. And it's an interesting phenomenon because it doesn't fit easily into a solar year or a lunar month. It was clearly instituted by God for the best organizing of human life. And 4 times in these 3 verses, we read that God had finished his work, and 3 times that he had finished all his work. Now, the word rested simply means that God ceased his creative work, not that he ceased all activity. And this pattern, established by God, forms the basis of the Sabbath principle, which would later be enshrined in Old Testament law. By the way, it also provides a further defense of the literal 6 days position of creation, because the Sabbath principle is meaningless if the 6 days can be an indefinite period of time or an age. But as we draw this study to a close, let's just make an important point. You see, again, scientists can study the existence of the universe, but there is one question they simply can't answer. It's the question, why? Why does the universe, in all its amazing complexity and detail, exist? Why do you and I exist? Indeed, why is there something? Why is there anything and not nothing? Well, let me put it this way. What is the purpose of creation? The whole of creation, any individual part of creation, you and me. Well, the Bible tells us that the world was created and exists. You and I were created and we exist for God and for the glory of God. Think of how different scriptures put this. For from him and through him and to him are all things. To him be glory forever, says Paul in Romans 11:36. Or the psalmist, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. Psalm 19 and verse 1. Or we read of Christ in Colossians, for by him all things were created, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. Colossians 1:16. Do you know why the doctrine of special, even 6-day creation is one of the biblical truths most hated and under attack by Satan? The answer is simple. Because he hates God getting the glory and the credit for anything. And this world, in all its vastness, in all its intricate interconnectedness, in all its design, in all its beauty, in all its breathtaking wonder, you and I, in all our intricate complexity as human beings, we were created to be demonstrations of the glory of God. We were created to declare, to proclaim, to manifest, to show forth the glory of God. So let's give ourselves to that great task, to demonstrate and declare to the world that God is, and that God is truly, breathtakingly glorious.